Welcome to the OSET Women in Technology session on management. This session is appropriately and obviously titled Management for Women in Technology. In this session, we're going to look at a lot of different ideas that you can use in order to craft a unique and personal management style for yourself that will enable you to be a successful manager in the technology context. We're going to start the session by looking at two research questions that are commonly addressed in the research on women in management. So we call this section Management and the Gender Question. Then we're going to take a look at some management traps that you absolutely want to avoid. Then we're going to move on to 3 or 4 different perspectives on management. And these are ideas and skills and strategies that you want to adapt to build your unique management style. So these are authentic management, adaptive management, assertive management, and perception management. Then we're going to put you to work developing a personal development plan so that you can put all of this information and these ideas into practice. And finally, we'll wrap up by taking a look at some of the key resources that are available if you want to delve into this subject in more detail. There are 2 main research questions that researchers address in their studies on women in management. The first of these is the obvious one. Do men and women approach management differently? So do men and women have different management styles? The commonly held belief, if you ask anyone on the street, is that yes, men and women do manage quite differently. So there's a perception or a belief that women manage in a less hierarchical fashion, that they allow for more participation, so it's a more participatory style and a more inclusive style. And there's also a belief that women manage in a much more caring and supportive way. Interestingly, some of the research supports these commonly held beliefs that women do have a very different management style, but some of the research doesn't support it. So what researchers are now doing is they're taking a look at, okay, why do we have these 2 contradictory sets of ideas coming out of the research? What they're starting to uncover is that it all comes down to context or situation. In some situations, women will actually manage quite differently than men, so they'll have a very different management style. But in other situations, they'll actually manage exactly the same way as men. So what the research is now taking a look at is what exactly are those situations in which women and men behave differently when they're managers. So the jury's still out on this one, so keep your eye on research that's coming out of different business faculties, for example, Harvard, and see what the researchers uncover over the next few years about these differences. The next research question is the question of whether women are perceived differently when they're managers. So if you take a male manager and a female manager, are they perceived differently in that role by the people below them and the people above? And the answer, unfortunately, is a resounding yes. So there are still norms in society that say, you know what, women don't belong in a management role. So these are gender role norms that are still persisting. And so when employees and upper-level managers see women in a management role, it doesn't quite fit. Either consciously or subconsciously, they are actually perceiving those women differently. And unfortunately, it's usually a negative difference. So there's still that negative backlash against women who are in management positions or positions of authority. There are some very successful, high-profile women out there in the technology world as managers. They are CEOs, CFOs, COOs. These are very successful and very capable women. Unfortunately, there is still a negative stereotype when it comes to women as managers. It is not a flattering stereotype. Here are some of the stereotypes that are out there when it comes to women in management. And these stereotypes contradict each other, interestingly. So one stereotype is that women are too emotional and too soft, too warm and fuzzy, so they're not effective. The opposite stereotype is that women are too manly and they just try to imitate men and be men when they manage, so that's not flattering either. Then there's the wonderful B word. So that as soon as a woman tries to be assertive and, put direction in place and say, look, this is what we're going to do, the B word comes out. My favorite word. And then there's also the wonderful stereotype that, oh, she just got to the top because she slept her way there. Wonderfully flattering. There's no consideration that maybe she's capable. I'm not saying everyone believes these stereotypes. Certainly everyone doesn't, but these stereotypes are still out there and they still affect how women in management are perceived. Next, we're going to take a look at what you should not do as a manager. We're not going to talk about what you should do yet. We're going to talk about what you should not do. So these are management traps to avoid so that you don't get tripped up or you don't trip yourself up when it comes to being a manager. The first trap to avoid is don't manage like a man. And I've put like a man in quotation marks there. What you don't want to do is you don't want to go into your management position thinking that you have to behave as a stereotypical male manager would behave. So you don't have to take on male gender norms in order to be a successful manager. This actually used to be the case when pioneer women managers were first pushing against that glass ceiling and pushing themselves upwards in organizations. Many of them felt legitimately that they had to behave like men in order to be taken seriously, because they had to counteract that stereotype that, women are too emotional and too soft in order to be managers. So regardless of their individual personalities, a lot of the early female managers felt like they had to manage like a man. Well, this is not an effective and it's not an authentic way to go. So don't go this route. Don't manage like a stereotypical man. The next trap to avoid is don't manage like someone else. Back in the 80s and 90s, a lot of the management research focused on identifying the personality traits or characteristics that made a successful manager, whether this manager was male or female, it didn't matter. So what researchers did is identify, okay, this is a personality trait that makes someone successful, here's another personality trait, and so on. And then they encouraged new managers or managers hoping to move up to adopt or adapt these personality traits. What researchers have now found is that this actually isn't the way to go, because by imitating someone, basically, you're not being true to yourself, and you just become a lesser version of someone else. So what you want to do is become the best version of you. Don't become a lesser version of someone else by trying to imitate him or her. The next trap to avoid is being too emotional. As we've already mentioned, this is the female stereotype when it comes to management. Women are too emotional. You don't want to go there. So don't cry, absolutely don't cry, and don't throw anger around, don't throw any excessive emotion around. You just don't want to manage by emotion. The next trap is very similar to don't manage by emotion, and that is don't manage by drama. Don't be a drama queen. By that I mean don't overreact to situations and don't exaggerate situations. Just approach things that happen very calmly. Here's the next one. Don't manage by stress. We all know it's a very obvious statement that managing can actually be very stressful. And it's very easy to let that stress become your driver. So the stress is all you think about, the stress is all you talk about, and you just get caught up in this whole stressful whirlwind. And I can talk about this because I'm very guilty of this myself. This type of management or this approach to managing is simply not sustainable. You'll exhaust yourself. So you want to, yes, you're going to have stressful situations, but at the end of those, you want to bring your stress down. Don't let stress be your driver. Let your driver be your enjoyment for what you're doing. The next management trap is a uniquely female one. Don't be a queen bee, or don't manage like a queen bee. What's a queen bee? Well, a queen bee is obviously female, and she keeps her female subordinates subordinate. So she's highly critical of the females she's supervising or the females below her, and she doesn't allow them to thrive. The queen bee syndrome or phenomenon was one that was uncovered by researchers when they looked at some female managers. So some female managers were much harder on their subordinates than they were on their male subordinates. And the thinking was, okay, they're doing this in order to not allow any other female employees to ascend to the management ranks. There are some queen bees out there. It's not quite as common as researchers thought it was, but it's definitely a behavior that you don't want to fall into. You don't want to be accused of or perceived as keeping your female employees below you and not encouraging them to also ascend the management ranks. So don't be a queen bee. Here's the final management trap. Don't manage to be liked. This one's really hard not to do, particularly for women, because one of the things that women encounter when they're trying to move up the management ranks or be successful in their careers is that women are very often judged on their likability. So a lot of success for women comes from being likable, not from being competent. Interesting. So what women fall into is they manage to be liked because their likability is what got them into that management position in the first place. But you can't manage to be liked. Your employees are not your friends. There is a line, whether you keep it a very clear line or a subtle line, there is a line between you and your employees. You can't be liked because there are times when you are going to have to make very challenging situations. So you can be seen as being friendly, you can be seen as being caring about your staff, but you cannot manage to be liked. That is a trap you do not want to fall into. If you want to delve into the management traps in more detail so that you make sure you don't do them, there are 2 resources that I've recommended on your handout. I call these the Nice Girls Don't books. So Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office and Nice Girls Just Don't Get It. These are very blunt books. They're very clearly spell out behaviors that women managers fall into that work against them as managers. So I recommend these books. Take a look at them if you've got some time. Now that we've looked at what you should not do or you don't want to do as a woman manager, we're going to take a look at what you should do or what you want to do. The first of these is called authentic management. Authentic management is kind of a buzzword right now in the business research community, particularly at Harvard. Authentic management is not managing by copying someone else or imitating someone. Authentic management is about being the best person that you can be. So you'll be a good manager if you're the best person that you can be. So authentic management means you look at yourself and your unique combination of personality traits and characteristics, and then you figure out how to make that combination or that uniqueness work for you as a manager. So this is what authentic management is all about. And authentic management's really powerful because it says, don't manage like a woman, don't manage like a man, manage like you. Here are some characteristics of authentic managers. First and foremost, authentic managers are unique to who they are. So authentic managers know who they are, they know their personality traits, and then they use those in order to develop a unique management style. Hand in hand with that is authentic managers use their life experiences to inform their management style. So all those life experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly, that all comes together to create you as an authentic manager that only you can be, because only you have had that particular set of experiences. Authentic managers are self-aware. So authentic managers know their personality traits and they know their life experiences and they know how these all mix together. And authentic managers also know their core values. So they know that set of values deep within themselves that drive them. And they live by those core values and they manage by those core values. So authentic managers know what their core values are and they manage according to those core values. Authentic managers also know what motivates them. They know what drives them, they know what gets them up in the morning, they know what makes them feel good about life, and they know what makes them feel satisfied. So authentic managers know their own drivers. Authentic managers develop themselves professionally by looking for and by embracing learning experiences that will allow them to grow as managers and as people. So authentic managers are always on the lookout for new challenges, new things to learn, new ways to push themselves outside of their comfort zone. Authentic managers don't stay in a comfort zone. And finally, authentic managers take responsibility for their own learning. They don't sit around waiting for someone to hand them something. Nobody comes along to an authentic manager and says, oh, I want you to take this professional development session, or I want you to take this course. Authentic managers go out and look for those opportunities. They know what they want to learn and they go out and look for them. And authentic managers encourage their staff to do exactly the same thing. So authentic managers encourage their staff to be lifelong learners just as they are themselves. The idea of authentic management really came out of Harvard, and so I would encourage you to go right to the source for more information about authentic management. We've given you an article from the Harvard Business Review on your handout, and this is an awesome article. It really delves into this whole concept of authentic management. Take a look at it. The next idea we're going to look at is also a buzzword in research circles right now, and this is the concept of adaptive management. Adaptive management is all about selecting a specific management style according to the context. So as a good manager or a successful manager, you're not going to say, okay, this is my management style and I'm always going to manage this way. What you're going to do is take a look at the context or the environment or the situation, you're going to evaluate it, and then you're going to make a decision about which management style to apply or to adapt for that particular situation. So adaptive management is all about selecting an appropriate management style based upon what the context demands. There are many different ways to categorize management styles to talk about which styles an adaptive manager will select from in which situations. We're going to use a very simple categorizing system, and there are 4 categories in this system. So on one side there is an autocratic management style, then a bureaucratic management style, then a democratic management style, and finally a laissez-faire management style. And as we go from autocratic to laissez-faire, we have less and less management control or manager control and more employee control. So on the autocratic side of things, there's almost 100% manager control. And on the laissez-faire side of things, there's almost 100% employee control. And so what we do is we shift from manager control to employee control as we move through each of these 4 categories for management styles. So we'll take a look at each of these categories in more detail and talk about the contexts or situations in which this particular management style is appropriate. Even though you might think that an autocratic management style is no longer fashionable and doesn't fit with today's modern world, there are actually situations in which it is still appropriate to adapt an autocratic management style. So here are some of them. The first one is when you've got a new and untrained employee. You have to be autocratic because as the manager, you know what the employee needs to do, and the employee doesn't know what he or she needs to do. So with a new employee, you do actually have to be quite autocratic. You have to say, in this situation, do this, do this, do this, and do this. An autocratic management style is also appropriate when you have an employee who simply doesn't respond to any other management style. So you've tried a bureaucratic style or you've tried a democratic style, and the employee doesn't respond, and you need him or her to get the work done, then you're going to apply an autocratic management style. You'll also use an autocratic management style if your organization is under a lot of pressure to produce something within a short time frame. So you need to get a product out the door, you need to get a service completed, you have to apply the pressure, and an autocratic management style is appropriate in this situation as well. I sort of talked about this one already, but I'll say it again. When there are time pressures in your organization and time is of the essence, there's no time for discussion, there's no time for debate, that's when the autocratic management style is appropriate. It's also appropriate when you're getting a lot of pushback from an employee. So the employee is constantly challenging you and pushing you. Then it is actually appropriate to bring out the autocratic management style and say, just do this. An autocratic management style might also be appropriate, not always, but it might be appropriate if there's part of the organization that needs significant restructuring. So the organization is falling apart, it's not working well, and you need to take action, and then an autocratic management style is one of the approaches or one of the styles to use here. And finally, an autocratic management style is imperative in any crisis situation. Any situation of urgency, that's when the autocratic management style comes out. To give you a very simple example, if the building is burning, you're not going to sit there with your employees and say, you know, let's discuss this. We've got this burning building. What do you think we should do? Let's take a vote on it. No, because the building's going to burn around you. When you have an urgent situation, you just say, look, the building's on fire. Get out now. You give a direct order and you expect it to be followed. So in crisis situations, that's also when it's appropriate to use an autocratic management style. A bureaucratic management style is a style that goes back to processes, procedures, and standards. So when an employee comes to the manager and asks, well, what should I do in this situation? The manager pulls out the standards or pulls out the company processes or procedures and says, well, look, here's what it says, here's what you should do. It's called managing by the book. A bureaucratic management style is appropriate when employees are doing a lot of repetitive tasks, and those repetitive tasks have a very clear right and wrong way to do them. So for example, if they've just got a same set of procedures they have to do over and over and over and over again, a bureaucratic management style is the way to go. A bureaucratic management style is also appropriate when employees simply need to know that yes, there are standards, there are procedures, and there are processes that need to be followed. A lot of people kind of are against process and procedure, but process and procedure is one of the things that holds an organization together, regardless of the type of organization. So at some point, all employees and all staff need to know, yes, there are processes and procedures that are in place, and we do need to follow them. A bureaucratic style is also important when employees are using or learning to use expensive equipment or sensitive equipment, and they need to know the processes through which to use that equipment appropriately. When employees are being trained or learning how to do things in an organization and the training is focused on the processes and procedures, obviously a bureaucratic style is appropriate as well. When the focus of training is on process, use a bureaucratic style. When your organization is being audited according to some set of standards, so for example, it's undergoing ISO, then a bureaucratic style once again is appropriate because you need to focus on standards, processes, and procedures when it comes to auditing. And finally, a bureaucratic style is appropriate when your employees are responsible for the organization's finances and accounting. Once again, this is all about process. So to sum up, any time that anything has to do with process, that's when a bureaucratic style comes into play. A democratic management style is also known as a participatory style. Remember on our continuum from manager control to employee control, the democratic management style is very much on the employee control side of things. So with a democratic management style, you're giving employees much more control over what they do on a day-to-day basis, and also much more control over the direction of the organization. So there is a lot of discussion, debate, and participation. A democratic management style with a lot of participation is appropriate when trust needs to be built between employees and managers. So there's a very distrustful relationship right now. So you can use discussion and that participation in order to build that trust. The democratic management style is also a really good way for a manager to find out about her staff. So if you don't know a lot about your staff, you don't know them very well, and you want to start to learn who they are and how they function and what they're good at, then a democratic management style is the way to go. It gives you lots of information about what your staff are capable of. Democratic management style is also really good if you want to shift your employees' thinking a little bit and the way they do things a little bit. If you've got employees who are very dependent on you for everything, so they come to you for every little decision, every little thing they have to do, you have to check it and give approval. That's the type of employee that's going to drain your time and resources, unless you like that and you like to micromanage. If you want to shift your employees away from their dependency on you, then you're going to shift to a democratic management style. You're literally going to push decisions onto those employees and almost force them to start thinking for themselves and making decisions for themselves. A democratic management style is also a really good way to start to develop the management capabilities of your staff. So the more responsibility you give your staff, the more comfortable they become making decisions, and the better they become at making decisions. So a democratic management style really allows you to help your staff develop themselves as potential managers. If you have a large and complex problem to solve, a democratic management style is the way to go. This allows you to draw upon all of the expertise that your staff have. So one person alone can't solve this problem. Many people together can solve the problem. And so a democratic management style will get that problem solved. A democratic management style also serves as one long extended team building activity. It allows your team to become very cohesive as they're exchanging ideas, debating things, and participating in that decision-making process. So a democratic management style will give you a very strong, cohesive team. If as a manager you want to allow your staff opportunities to grow and learn, and here's a hint, you do, a democratic management style is the way to go. So this management style allows you to give your staff opportunities to try new things and to take on more responsibilities. And finally, a democratic management style really allows you to tap into all of the expertise, all of the knowledge that you've got within your group of employees. So if you need to tap into this knowledge, you know for a fact you don't have that knowledge yourself, then a democratic management style is the way to go. The final management style in our 4 management styles that go along this continuum from manager control to employee control is the laissez-faire management style. And this is where employees have a lot, and I do mean a lot of control. Laissez-faire is basically hands-off. As the manager, you step back and you allow employees to make their own decisions, organize their own days, go after their own goals and their own rewards. So you're very much in the background or on the side. A laissez-faire management style is really effective when you've got a group of highly educated, trained, and experienced employees. So they're very capable on their own. They just don't need your support. So you can just step back and let them go. You'll also want to use a laissez-faire management style when you're working with outside experts or consultants that your organization has brought in. So you don't want to try and micromanage and maintain too much control over those consultants because you've hired them because they're capable. So you've brought them into your organization to help you with something. You just need to stand back and let them help you. In order for a laissez-faire management style to work, there has to be a lot of trust between the manager and the employees. So when there is that high degree of trust, a laissez-faire style is appropriate. You totally trust that your employees are working when they say they're working, they're completing what they say they complete, and they're doing it well. So you trust them to do their job, so once again, you step back and you let them do it. And finally, a laissez-faire management style is appropriate when you've got a very small team. So it's very easy for you as a manager to informally keep track of what's going on. So you don't need any formal and articulated systems of control because your team is very small. So you can just step back and informally keep track of what's going on. So as a quick recap, adaptive management is all about adapting a particular management style that's appropriate for a particular situation. This is not an easy management style to put into place because you have to be very, very aware of your context and the needs of your context. So you have to know what's going on around you, what is necessary and what needs to be done in that particular situation, and then you pick the management style that fits that situation. So managers who are adaptive managers really, really, really know their context and they respond to what that context needs. The next type of management we're going to talk about is assertive management. Assertive management means walking a very fine line between being too passive, so standing back and letting things happen, versus being too aggressive, really going after what needs to be done. So the middle ground is being assertive. Assertive management is really, really important, particularly for women, because if as women we stray too far on the passive side, we get walked all over. And if we stray too far on the aggressive side, we get a backlash because aggressive behavior goes against the gender norm for women, and so we're perceived very negatively if we go over there. So as women, we need to adapt. We really need to adapt, I can't stress that enough, an assertive management style in order to walk that line between passive and aggressive. Assertive is where we will be successful as women managers. Because being an assertive manager is so important for women managers, we're going to take a look at this in a bit more detail. You've got a chart in your handout that indicates different types of behavior, and then it gives the passive version, the aggressive version, and then the assertive version. We're going to go through this chart just to make sure you understand exactly what assertive management looks like so that you can adapt an assertive management style. So let's take a look at posture. A passive manager would be hunched over, not occupying a lot of space. An aggressive manager would be leaning towards the other person, kind of getting in their personal space, being in their face. An assertive manager is going to stand upright, shoulders back, and just exude confidence through posture. A passive manager is going to have quick, unfocused, and quite nervous movements and gestures, kind of like flittering around like a bird, so to speak. An aggressive manager is going to have rapid, sharp, or large gestures, so they're going to be very rapid and powerful and direct gestures and movements. An assertive manager is relaxed and fluid, okay? Not stiff or nervous, but just very confident and relaxed and fluid. A passive manager has greater physical distance between herself and her employees, and she often turns away from interactions in order to to protect herself. An aggressive manager does the opposite. An aggressive manager has closer distance than normal and actually invades people's personal space. Finally, an assertive manager has a normal conversational distance in all interactions. Eye contact is really important in being an assertive manager. So a passive manager is going to avoid eye contact altogether and is going to look down. An aggressive manager is going to be very direct and fixed and almost glaring with her eye contact. However, an assertive manager has frequent eye contact, but it's occasionally broken by horizontal glances or glances around the room. A passive manager has anxious or apologetic facial expressions and always looks a little bit nervous, has a nervous smile and may be flushed, and just doesn't look comfortable. An aggressive manager has a facial expression that looks angry. So it's very angry, tense muscles, and red from anger, not red from nervousness. Finally, an assertive manager has facial expressions that are appropriate to the context of the message. Just a very calm, collected set of facial expressions. A passive manager has minimal physical contact, so a passive manager doesn't even like to shake people's hands. An aggressive manager, on the other hand, has very firm, jabbing, pointing type of physical contact, and it's almost violent in its nature. An assertive manager has gentle physical contact to express empathy for the other person or to express confidence. Voice tone is really important when it comes to being assertive as a manager. A passive manager is going to be very quiet and also has a rising pitch or a rising intonation at the end of every statement to signal uncertainty. An assertive manager resorts to yelling and shouting and throws lots of emotion and volume into her voice. Finally, an assertive manager has a warm, well-modulated voice tone, so all of the intonation is appropriate, and it's once again a very calm approach to speaking. A passive manager does not speak fluently. She has a lot of hesitation, a lot of incomplete sentences, and a lot of dangling sentences. An aggressive manager may go either way. So she may speak slower in order to put forward aggression, or she may speak faster in order to put forward aggression. An assertive manager, however, speaks evenly and just with a conversational level of fluency. There's no hurry, there's no hesitation. Finally, physical appearance is an important component of being an assertive manager. A passive manager is going to use her style to actually blend in with the group. So this is a typical wallflower scenario. An aggressive manager is going to use her physical appearance to intimidate others or to communicate power. An assertive manager, however, is going to choose her physical appearance or use it to reflect her personality, and it's a very adaptable style depending on the situation. I can't stress enough how important it is for women managers to learn assertive management. We've given you a resource to look at called the Assertiveness Workbook, which takes you through how to be assertive in a lot of different situations. It also helps you evaluate your current degree of assertiveness and gives you strategies to learn to be more assertive in the future. So I highly recommend this resource. Really make sure that you are an assertive manager. Now it's time to talk about perception management. Perception management is not a management style. Rather, it's the conscious process of managing how other people perceive you as a manager. This is really important. When I first started out as a manager, I didn't think managing how people perceive me was important because I thought I'm smart, I work hard, I'm good at what I do, I'm very competent. That should be enough for people to perceive me as a good manager. That was not the reality, and it is still not the reality today. Just because you're good at what you do doesn't mean people are going to perceive you that way. There are two strategic things that you have to keep in mind in order to manage the perception that people have of you. It's not all about being good at what you do. You have to be, but you have to be more than that. I want you to get rid of two delusions. The first delusion is, don't delude yourself that physical appearance does not matter for women. It does. And I learned this to my detriment throughout my career. It took me a long time to learn this one. So don't be like me, learn this one right now. People care about the physical appearance of women managers, much more so than they care about the physical appearance of men managers. That's the reality. You might not like it, I certainly don't like it, but that's the reality. So pay attention to your physical appearance. Learn how to dress professionally and appropriate for your particular work context. If you're out in the field, obviously you're not going to go out in the field in a skirt and high heels and things like that, but always make sure that your appearance is appropriate to the context. Make sure you're neat, clean, and professionally turned out. You are being judged on your physical appearance, whether you like it or not. Here's another delusion to get rid of. Women are also judged on their language choices. Don't believe otherwise. Don't delude yourself that your language choices don't matter. They do. What do I mean by language choices? Primarily, I mean swearing. We all get angry, we all get frustrated, and swearing is a way to relieve that anger or relieve that frustration. Unfortunately, swearing from women is perceived very differently than swearing from men, still to this day. Male managers can get away with swearing at employees or swearing in a particular situation. Sometimes that's actually changing, but they can still usually get away with it. Women managers can't. We're perceived very differently when we swear than men are perceived. So be very conscious of your language choices. Once again, you're being evaluated and judged on those language choices. You might not like this whole idea of perception management. When I started out as a manager, I didn't like it. I really didn't, and I didn't think it was fair that I was being judged on anything other than my own competency. But I couldn't change the reality of the world, and you can't either. So if you don't acknowledge that you have to engage in perception management, you will not be successful as a manager. Don't be paranoid about it or hyper concerned about it, but be consciously aware of the perception that your employees have of you and your upper managers have of you. Manage that perception by paying attention to your physical appearance and your language choices. You may not like it, but deal with the reality that's out there. You'll see a resource on your handout, The Well-Spoken Woman. You may not even like the title, that may make you cringe, but it is a good book for addressing these perception management strategies that women need to engage in as managers. So if this is an area that you protest or that you're not comfortable with, take a look at this resource. You might not like everything that you see in there. Even at the very least, pick or choose a few strategies just to address so that you can get more comfortable with this idea of perception management. It's a good resource, it's a solid resource, and there's some great ideas in there. It's time for you to get to work. Take a look back through your handout and review the different ideas that we've given you. If you want, rewatch different parts of the video to refresh your memory about these ideas. Then sit down and put together an action plan for yourself in order to develop your own personal management style. Remember, you need a management style that you're comfortable with and that you can be effective with. So take some time, pick 3 priorities, 3 things that you're going to work on in the next 4 months in order to develop your management style and your management skills. Write them down on your handout and hold yourself accountable to taking these actions. On your handout, we've given you a list of all of the resources and references that we used in order to put this session together. I strongly recommend that you start to build a library of resources that will help you in your career as a manager. These particular resources are helpful to you as a woman manager. So if there are any topics that are of interest to you, take a look at the resources we've provided and do some additional research. Here's a quick recap of what we've covered in this session. We started out by looking at what the research says about women in management. So we looked at management and the gender question. Then we looked at management traps to avoid, so what not to do as a woman manager, or as a manager at all for that matter. Then we looked at what to do as a manager. So we looked at developing an authentic management style, developing an adaptive management style, and developing an assertive management style. Then we briefly talked about the necessity for perception management for women managers. And finally, we had you do an action plan so that you can take everything you've learned in this session and put it into practice as it relates to your specific situation as a manager. All the best as you build your career as a woman manager in technology.